Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. My name is Bhante Sudaso, and I'm here with Ajahn Wade. And this is our weekly monk chat session, your opportunity to ask questions about Buddhism and our opportunity to attempt to answer them. So we'll start with paying homage to the Buddha, and then we'll start going through the questions that are present in the comments window. So if you would like to have some questions answered, you can go ahead and type them in at any time. So we'll start with homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So hello to the people joining in online. Hello to Anna Maria, Carol, Joseph, Zero Agenda, Lydia, Richard, Sean, Kauser Friend, Norma, Rick, Victoria, Bhumika, Manal, and Jayanta, and everybody else who's watching. Good to see all of you. And first question here is from Anna Maria, who says, Bhante Sudaso, 2 to 3 weeks ago, you mentioned how meditation has nothing to do with Buddhism. Can you elaborate, please? Yes, so that's an example of exaggeration for the sake of emphasis, because, of course, training the mind is an important part of Buddhism. So if we define the word meditation as being the intentional training of the mind, then that is in fact a part of Buddhism. The reason why I said what I said is because one of the tremendous problems I've observed in contemporary Buddhism, especially among convert Buddhists or people who are Bu curious, I haven't really noticed this problem so much with people who are actually born in Buddhist cultures. But people who are not born in Buddhist cultures often have this misunderstanding that Buddhism is all about meditation. And Buddhist practice just means doing a bunch of meditation. But this is a complete misunderstanding. So Buddhist practice is actually about following the Noble Eightfold Path. And the essence of Buddhist practice is renunciation. So this is actually more important than literally everything else that we do. Number one most important thing in Buddhist practice is renunciation. Ultimately, renunciation is what brings an end to our suffering. Renunciation is what cultivates wisdom. Renunciation is what culminates in awakening and full enlightenment. Renunciation is Buddhism. Buddhism is renunciation. Everything else we do in order to help us practice renunciation. So meditation is part of Buddhism, specific forms of meditation anyway, but it's used as a tool to help us in following the Noble Eightfold Path, and most importantly, to help us in cultivating perfect renunciation, culminating in the renunciation of that which is most difficult to let go of, which is our attachment to self-identity. So again, I think this is especially important to mention these days when there's a lot of different kinds of meditation that people are aware of, and there's a lot of different styles of meditation which people are practicing and different techniques they're practicing, and talk about the therapeutic benefits of meditation and all of that. And that's all fine, but it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Buddhism. One of the really critical errors that I've encountered was from someone who actually identified themselves as a Buddhist teacher. And they said, anyone who meditates is a Buddhist. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. Definitely not. There's lots and lots of people who meditate, but they're not practicing renunciation, and they're not cultivating the Eightfold Path. Therefore, they are not Buddhist. They don't have right view, they're not cultivating right effort, and so on. Therefore, they're not Buddhist. It doesn't matter that they sit down and focus on their breathing for a few minutes. That doesn't make you a Buddhist. I mean, cats spend a lot of time sitting still, focusing on their breathing. That doesn't mean that every cat is a Buddhist. Anyway, anything you want to add on this?
No, thanks.
Okay, great. And Joe says, I'm overjoyed to have come across this teaching from Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 2, Sutta 36. Would you help us understand the Pali and expand on the teaching? And there's a quote here in Pali. Tasmatiha sariputta evang sikitabang. So sariputta, therefore you should train in this way. Santindriya bhavisama santamanasa. Evan hivo sariputta sikitabang. So santindriya, so santa means peaceful. And indriya, usually it's translated as faculties. It's a word that doesn't translate particularly well into English, and it's also used in different ways in different contexts. It's sometimes used to refer to one's senses, sometimes used to refer to one's mental abilities or mental activities. It's sometimes used to refer to one's physical comportment. For example, one's facial expressions is part of one's indriya. So one's physical comportment, one's physical behavior is also indriya. Santa manasa is a bit more clear because manasa just means mind. So santa manasa means peaceful mind. So I would take this as saying one should train oneself in having peaceful conduct and a peaceful mind. So it's more about cultivating one in a sense of serenity and tranquility in everything that one does, both physically and mentally. And there's a further quote here. Santindriya nan hivo sariputta santamanasanang santang yeva kaya kamang bhavisati santang vachi kamang santang mano kamang. So what that means is that one who has peaceful faculties and a peaceful mind, so again, peaceful comportment and a peaceful mind. It says they will do peaceful bodily actions, peaceful verbal actions, and peaceful mental actions. Yeah, that registers. And it says, Santang yeva upaharang upaharisama sabrahmachari suti. Yeah, and it says that one who is maintaining serenity, maintaining peacefulness, can help maintain peacefulness among their fellow practitioners. So that's just kind of concluding with a little note of compassion, that as one trains oneself in peaceful comportment and a peaceful mind, then that will then support your fellow monks, your fellow practitioners, and also cultivating peaceful behavior and a peaceful mind. So that's what that means. I don't really have anything further to say. I think the text is actually perfectly clear. Do you think it needs any explanation?
Well, I don't know Pali, so.
Well, okay. I think it's clear enough then. Yeah. Okay, you can answer this one. Okay. Joe says, how does one practice to understand the gratification, danger, and escape of the four elements?
It's interesting. Yes, I think I remember. I think Joe's expressed interest in this form of teaching before here at Monk Chatton when he was here at the monastery. The gratification, danger, and escape of the four elements. Okay, so in general, it's a formula. The gratification, danger, and escape is a formula for recognizing how we can experience gratification with something, from engaging in some kind of behavior or some kind of experience or association with something or other, and that there's some danger in it that might not be what we would consider danger at first blush, in common English usage, but more kind of there's a disadvantage or a downside to it, or that even if there's a silver lining, there's a gray cloud in the middle. There's an unattractive aspect to it, or something like this. And then the escape would be about how we practice letting go. To overcome attachment or desire for this sort of thing that does have some gratification to it. So, for example, with sensual pleasures, we can notice that when we engage in, or when we experience sensual pleasures, that there is some gratification to sensual pleasures. As the Buddha says in the suttas, that if there was no gratification, then people wouldn't desire them. Right? And so there is some gratification to sensual pleasures. The danger is that they're impermanent, and so they pass. And in one way or another, we could experience some disappointment or something like this, Then the escape would be practicing, the various Buddhist practices we have for overcoming desire for these. With the four elements, so the four elements are the basic constituents of what you might call matter and energy. Matter in its three phases of solid, liquid, and gaseous. So we have, as it says in the sutras, it's earth, water, and air, and then also energy, which is represented by the fire element. So these are the four great elements, and there can be some gratification in these. So, for example, when we talk about the four great elements in the form of the human body, there's the gratification in being able to use the human body for various kinds of activities that we want to perform. However, one form of danger is that the human body is impermanent and it's unstable, is subject to old age, disease, and death, for example. The Buddha recounted how he came to understand this early on his spiritual path. I can't remember if he was still a bodhisattva. He still was a bodhisattva, but I can't remember if it was before he went forth from the home life into homelessness or not. But he realized that he was subject to old age, disease, and death, and that when he contemplated this, intoxication with youth, health, and life fell away, and so he became sober to the realities of life, and so this is one way that you can escape from desire for the four elements. In this example, in regard to the human body, you can recollect that it's subject to old age, disease, and death, and then you can experience the clarity and the equanimity associated with letting go, and make more skillful choices with regard to what to do. Thank you for that for your consideration, Joe.
Great. And next we have a question here from Richard. Richard says, how to deal with worldly praise. For example, when people praise you for getting a degree. In Majjhima Nikaya 50, the rebuke to Mara, the Buddha recommends to contemplate impermanence, dissatisfaction with the entire world, ugliness of the body, and repulsiveness of food. Okay, so how to deal with worldly praise. The example you gave of getting a degree doesn't apply to me because I don't have a degree, never got one. So I've never been praised for getting a degree. So check that one off the list. That's easy. What I normally receive praise for is around Dhamma teachings, but there it's very easy because they're not praising me, they're praising the Dhamma. So when I receive that kind of praise, I'm just like, oh, you love the Dhamma. That's great. I also love the Dhamma. Oh, you think the Buddha's teachings are wonderful. Me too. Yes, we all love the Buddha and the Dhamma. So then it's not about me. It's about us sharing a mutual appreciation for something beautiful and praiseworthy and good, which is the Buddha Dhamma. So that's a way of deflecting it. So they're not praising me, Bhante Sudaso, but rather they're praising the Buddha Dhamma, which is something that I also value and praise and respect. So that depersonalizes it. And it's actually the same with anything else. Like if you grew up in a family where your parents taught you how to cook really good pasta, and then people praise you for making really good pasta. Well, what they're actually doing is they're praising your parents for having taught you how to make that pasta. You can't take personal credit for it. It's something that you received from the outside. Even if you think, no, I learned this myself. Well, actually think about it. Where did you get that knowledge from? Did you go out in the wild and experiment with different plants until you found one that you decided to call wheat? Then you decided to cultivate a field of this weed that you found, and somewhere out of the blue, you randomly decided to crush it into powder and mix it with water and make it into little long stringy things. Did you really invent pasta all by yourself? Or is it something that you learned from other people? And you start to think about it and you realize, actually, every single piece of knowledge you have, every idea you have, everything you do is unoriginal. You never came up with anything by yourself, ever. Every single thing you have ever done and ever will do is just a manifestation of input from the outside world. Always has been this way and always will be this way. So somebody praises you for getting a degree. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with you. Odds are it wasn't even your idea to get the degree in the first place. Probably somebody else. Probably societal pressure, cultural influences. There's many things which led you to making a choice which you thought was your own choice, but which was heavily conditioned by everything outside of you. So what are you, once again, what are they actually praising? They're praising the fact that you blindly followed your conditioning. Well, that's actually not very praiseworthy when you think about it. Or they're praising the conditioning itself, which again doesn't have anything to do with you. Or maybe they're praising having a degree, which, let's be realistic, is meaningless. It's of incredibly little actual value, possibly zero value, depending upon the degree and what you're doing with it. Possibly negative value, once again, depending on the degree and what you're doing with it. So it's utterly meaningless. Someone praising you for getting a degree. By the way, that won't be me. I will never praise you for getting a degree. So when somebody praises something, they're not, like, if somebody praises you for something, they're actually saying more about their own values than they are about you or anything you've done. So these are ways where you can reflect on the non-self component when receiving praise and kind of defuse that tendency to become arrogant or conceited around it. And then you mentioned Majjhima Nikaya 50 and says the Buddha recommends to contemplate impermanence and dissatisfaction. So that's anicca and dukkha. So anicca, recognizing the unstable and non-persistent nature of praise itself. Sometimes you get praised, sometimes you get criticized. I've been the target of a lot of both in my short life. So at some point, you just need to learn to stop taking it seriously. Life means that you will experience 8 things: praise, criticism, pleasure, pain, gain, loss, good reputation, and bad reputation. And these are the 8 worldly conditions. Just going through life means that you will experience these 8 things over and over and over again. So our practice then is to be equanimous, regardless of which one is currently happening. So someone praises you, well, you recognize, oh, this is temporary. Today they're praising me, tomorrow they'll be criticizing me. That's just how it goes. Today people are spreading good stories about you, tomorrow they're spreading malicious gossip about you. It's just how it goes. You don't take it personally, you just recognize it as being one of the shifting winds of samsara, part of the weather, the ever-changing weather conditions of samsara. And the dukkha of it, well, again, recognizing that, again, when we're being criticized, that's painful. When people are praising us, that's also painful. Why is it painful? Well, first off, it's painful because we tend to inflate our ego. And we start to become reliant upon it. When people are praising us all the time, we feel great. Then when the praise diminishes or disappears, then we get withdrawal. It's like, oh, what's going wrong? Something's wrong. Nobody's praised me in 5 or 10 minutes. I need praise. Praise me. Praise me. I need compliments. So noticing how the mind gets in that kind of awkward relationship if we start to become fixated upon receiving praise or a good reputation. So that's the dukkha component of that. It's in the uncomfortable addiction and unreliability that comes with it. And then you mentioned 2 other things. So the Buddha said, oh, dissatisfaction with the entire world. I want to see the Pali of that. If I were to guess, it's sabaloke anabhirata sanya, which means more like perceiving the entire world as not worth seeking delight in. The unlikability of the whole world would be a bit more accurate. Or seeing everything in the world as being not worthy of obsessing about. And again, that's because we see that everything is temporary and unreliable, therefore not a reliable basis of happiness. Ugliness of the body is a phenomenally bad translation of asubha sanya, is what I would guess. So asubha just means non-beauty, and it doesn't even specifically relate to the body, though it commonly is used in relationship to bodies. So it doesn't mean seeing things as ugly, it means seeing them as non-beautiful. So that's actually a neutral state of mind, a calm, cool, peaceful state of mind. Seeing everything as ugly means cultivating a mind of aversion and negativity, whereas seeing everything as beautiful means cultivating a mind of obsession and attachment. Seeing everything as asubha, as non-beautiful, means setting aside the judgment of beauty and ugliness and just seeing things as they actually are. So asubha sanya is actually cultivating a mind of equanimity. It's very commonly misunderstood. People often think that asubha sanya means seeing everything as disgusting. But that's actually not the Buddha's teachings. That's just cultivating dosa. Asubha sanya means seeing everything as non-beautiful and also non-ugly, but rather having an equanimous relationship with everything. Similarly, repulsiveness of food, another awful translation, ahara particula sanya. Again, it means seeing food as undesirable, recognizing the unattractiveness of food. So what is food? Food is just fuel for the body. That's it. Food is medicine to keep the body alive and healthy. That's it. So not getting fixated on the superficial pleasure of eating, but rather recognizing the actual nature of food, which as fuel and medicine for the body. Again, a peaceful, cool, equanimous relationship with food. You're not supposed to hate food. That's not Buddhism at all. We're also not supposed to love it, but rather we just see that food is something that supports our physical health and therefore our spiritual practice. Okay, good. Okay, and Stevie says, how did the community verify that the Buddha became enlightened? Do you want to answer this one?
Okay, sure. Well, Stevie, is a great question. We may wonder, many of us may wonder today, how do we know if the Buddha was really enlightened or not? And some may question, how do we know the Buddha even existed? And this is actually an open question for many people, even if they find the wisdom of the suttas, for example, very, very enlightening, or if they find Buddhist practice very, very helpful. They may say to themselves, well, how do I know the Buddha even existed? And then how do I know that he was enlightened? But let's see. So how to answer this? What I could say is maybe a few things. Approaching an answer to this question. You see, to my knowledge, there never was any kind of a communal verification of whether or not the Buddha was enlightened. Except perhaps for the fact that it seems that he had many disciples who believed that he was enlightened, and that they undertook to perpetuate his teachings after he passed away, and to continue living the lifestyle that he recommended. But to my knowledge, there never was a vote on it or official communal agreement. But it seems quite clear that many of his disciples really felt that he was enlightened, if the scriptures are an indication. By the scriptural standard, actually, that people might have faith for many different reasons. And what the Buddha recommended in the suttas, in terms of really having a firm faith that the Buddha was enlightened, is to walk the Noble Eightfold Path, consisting of following precepts and meditating and developing wisdom, all the way to the point of attaining what we call sotapanna, or stream entry, where you enter the stream of Dhamma, of the Buddha's teachings, heading towards enlightenment. Because if you follow this all the way to that point of attaining stream entry, more specifically the fruit of stream entry, you can say technically, then you go all the way to the point of going through the learning stages that it takes to let go of everything and experience nibbana very briefly, and then coming back and then to practice some more to attain full enlightenment. But having had that experience of nibbana and going through the learning stages that take you there, the practitioner gets this very firm faith that actually the Buddha was enlightened, and also that the Dhamma was well taught, the Buddha's teachings, that is, were well taught, and that the community of his saintly disciples really did practice well. But then it says in the suttas that one doesn't know that the Buddha was enlightened until you attain enlightenment yourself. And so you keep practicing all the way until you attain enlightenment. And then that's when you really know that the Buddha was fully enlightened. And that when you attain enlightenment, that you're out of the round of rebirths altogether, and that you experience the freedom from suffering forever. I think maybe perhaps on a kind of a practical note, in our day-to-day lives, for many of us who are still working towards that kind of a goal, what we tend to focus on more is, well, if I follow these teachings, do I get some benefit from them? And I think for the Buddha, that was what was really important. What he recommended in the suttas was, well, if you find religious teachings that help you reduce your greed, your aversion, and your delusion, the poisons in the mind that lead to suffering, and that they're praised by the wise, then these are teachings that you should keep and continue following. And so for those of us who aren't enlightened yet, we may not really know for sure that the Buddha was enlightened, but we may feel that the Buddha's teachings are really helping us, and that's really what's the most important thing.
Okay, and Zero Agenda, who I suspect does have an agenda, says, for Uposatha as a layperson, what do you suggest one do in normal life for full moons? Like not eating after noon and extra meditation. Does Empty Cloud hold events for Uposatha? Well, your recommendations there are great. Not eating after noon for a day. Following the 8 precepts. Actually, for the standard recommendation for a layperson's Uposatha is on the full moon and new moon day, so that's twice a month, once every 2 weeks, to follow the 8 precepts for a day. One of those is, in fact, not eating after noon, but there's also some other important ones. Celibacy for a day, which to me doesn't seem like a big deal, but I hear for some people that's actually challenging.
How many days is it now?
I mean, I'd have to do the math, but it's a lot of days. And I think I'm doing okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
14 wasa.
So 14 times 365. That's a big number.
Plus, Bhante, you were a novice for a year. I think, right? Roughly a year.
Anyway, a lot of days.
So it's a lot of days.
I'm doing fine. You can do a day. And no music, no watching shows, no dancing, no singing, either participating or watching such things. Another really big one for some people is not using cosmetics and jewelry. It's actually amazing. So this is actually a standard monastery rule. And it's amazing how many people come to stay in the monastery, and you look at them in the morning and it's like, pretty sure you didn't wake up looking like that. Pretty sure you spent a few minutes with your makeup case in front of the mirror this morning. And I don't normally call people out for these things unless it's really obvious. But some people, they just cannot imagine going for a day without wearing cosmetics. Perfumes. It's also on the list. Don't use perfumes for a day. In monasteries, it's really obvious when someone's wearing perfume because we get used to human bodies just smelling like human bodies, which actually is a completely neutral smell. And then somebody walks in the room wearing even just like a small socially acceptable amount of perfume, and it's instantly noticeable from all the way across the room. So try for a day. not wearing perfumes and cosmetics. Ideally, nothing scented. Also scented lotions, scented soaps. It's actually quite interesting to do only unscented things for a day. And no jewelry. Again, for some people, it's just unthinkable. Like not wearing your earrings for a day. Wow. Mind-blowing. But it is in fact possible. Yeah, so follow the 8 precepts and yeah, do extra meditation, listen to Dhamma talks. So for a day, instead of like watching shows and reading fiction, instead, listen to Dhamma talks, read suttas, do chanting, listen to chanting. So just have a day which is focused on Buddha Dhamma rather than on the shallow things of the world. So really recommend it. It can be really a powerful practice if you take the Uposatha days seriously as a layperson. That said, if you find it awkward with the Uposatha days when you're working on, again, most people are not following a schedule where they can take the full moon and new moon days off. Traditionally in Buddhist countries, those actually were holidays. So full moon and new moon days would be your days off from work. I don't know, do they still do that in Sri Lanka? Do you still get Uposatha days off from work?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Sri Lanka is still a Buddhist country. That's good. Thailand, is that still, no? No? Is it still a thing? Oh, that's sad. It used to be that way in Thailand as well.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, so Thailand tragically is falling to modernization. So is Sri Lanka. It's just a bit slower. So the Dhamma is becoming corrupt everywhere in the world. Anyway, so if that's the case, then just do Saturday or Sunday. Which is, in fact, how we do things at Empty Cloud. So at Empty Cloud, we don't have an Uposatha day for the public. We have it in-house, but not for the public. Instead, we have an all-day program every Sunday. So that basically takes the place of Uposatha days here. Okay. Louisa says, sometimes when I am in deep meditation, I see an eye staring back or a disc-like object that radiates like a light. Is this a nimitta? No, that's a hallucination. Don't pay any attention to it. It is meaningless. 99.99% of the time when people think they're seeing a nimitta, it's not. And the other 0.001% of the time, don't pay attention to it either. Just stay with your meditation. I shouldn't get started talking about nimittas, or we'll be here all night. But most of what people think they know about nimittas doesn't have anything to do with anything the Buddha ever said. So just keep this in mind. Anytime you hear somebody say the word nimitta, that should be an instant warning bell. Warning bell that they're about to say a bunch of things that are not the Buddha's words. Because almost all the time, that's what it is. Okay. Norma says, how do we stop Vipitana? A blaming scapegoat mentality? Vipitana? I can't imagine what word that is.
I don't know either.
It sounds a little bit like Vibhava Tanha, but that doesn't have anything to do with blaming or scapegoating. Yeah, Norma, if you can find the actual word, then we can try to answer, but I think your spelling there is a little bit too far for me to guess what the word is.
We can maybe talk about our English translation if you want.
Blaming and scapegoating? Yeah, do you want to talk about that?
Okay. Blaming and scapegoating mentality. Okay, so, well, I think blaming and scapegoating comes from basically its root is an aversion to something that's occurred, perhaps something that you yourself have done. Of course, is quite it's a relatively natural state of mind, just like aversion in general is. And so I think that if we can recognize that this is some kind of aversion, I don't like what's happened, and for example, if I've done something wrong or something that I'm embarrassed by or something like this, and I want to shift the blame to somebody else, I'm just unhappy with the fact that I've done something, And so recognizing that and working on letting go of this kind of aversion, which you can do in multiple ways. But I think with this kind of a thing, it's more kind of like a mindfulness of most direct ways is a mindfulness with regard to the situation itself, and allowing yourself to kind of let go around it. This is I think is a very good strategy for this. That if the heart can see what it is that it's doing and the suffering it's creating for itself over all this kind of thing, then if you give it the opportunity to let go, along with this clear seeing, then it will do so. And slowly over time, it'll be less and less inclined to do that. That's what I can recommend you.
Samadhu. And this one, since you were just at Bhavana, I think it's better for you to answer this one. This one, Victoria says, what is life at Bhavana Society like? I've heard that Bhante Gunaratna gets a lot of visitors, so I'm curious what the general energy of the monastery is like.
Oh, well, so, I as Bhante mentioned, I've been staying there recently, but only for a couple of months. And only for a few weeks of that were we in the kind of the regular schedule of the year. The Bhavana Society goes into a winter seclusion period, as they call it, from early January until about mid-March, so a little over 2 months. Bhante Gunaratana, as he's known quite affectionately as Bhante Ji, begins his seclusion period a little bit earlier than that. So he was already on seclusion shortly after I arrived at the monastery. So it's quite a caveat there, but he gets so I can't say I know how many visitors he gets, and during the regular period of year and what the energy is like during that time. I have to admit, during the winter seclusion period, it's been very quiet and very few visitors. So now that I really think about it, I'm not really in a position to answer your question about what it's like the rest of the year. Okay. Sorry, Victoria.
And Julie says, can there be liking without any clinging or grasping? For example, in a circumstance whereby someone is not seeking pleasant feelings nor away from unpleasant feelings. Can there be liking without clinging or grasping? I'm inclined to say no, but there is such a thing as approval, in the sense of the wisdom mind which recognizes wholesome and unwholesome, and which approves that which is beneficial, and therefore disapproves of that which is harmful. So in that sense, there can be liking. So you could say, for example, that the Buddha liked it when his disciples followed the Dhamma, in the sense that he had the wise approval of people doing what is wholesome and beneficial. But that's a bit different from how we normally use the word like. Normally when we use the word like, we're talking about something that's in accordance with our desires. And that is not relevant to the awakened mind, because the awakened mind no longer has desire and therefore would no longer have liking and disliking in the way that we normally use these words. So I am inclined to say that yes, with some qualifications. I would say yes, liking is always associated with clinging and grasping. How do you feel? Yeah.
Oh no, I think that's great. Is the kind of making a distinction between unwholesome desires and wholesome desires. Yeah. And so I'll do.
Yep. And Julie clarifies further, can there be liking without any suffering? Well, again, if we're talking about liking as a preference for things being a certain way, then that means there is suffering. So again, I would say no. Richard says, sometimes when meditating, doubt arises in my mind about whether one day I will get the jhanas, but then I think better if not, and I'm just content with meditating without aspiring for any goals, and joy arises. But then doubt comes back and makes me think whether that's the right attitude to meditation or not. But that attitude be nekamma. Just relax, Richard. It's no big deal. Either you'll get jhana or you won't. Either it will be sooner or later. It might be in this life. It might be in a future life. Don't worry about it. Just keep doing your practice. Results come whenever they come. The important thing is persistence and patience. So with faith in the Buddha Dhamma, one practices patiently and persistently. And when doubt arises, then you see that as just being the tendency of the mind. Every now and then, the mind produces things like desire, aversion, agitation, dullness, and skepticism. These are just things that the mind does. The mind tends to make noise in these 5 ways. The mind tends to flail around in these 5 ways. So they're kind of like the 5 weather conditions of the mind. So you're watching the mind and you're like, okay, right now I'm filled with desire for sensuality. Oh, that's normal. The mind does that sometimes. No big deal. Right now I'm filled with hatred and disgust. Oh, it's also normal. The mind does that sometimes. No big deal. Oh, now the mind is full of dullness. Oh, yes, that happens sometimes too. Okay, this will go away in time as well. And you wait. You're like, oh, now the mind's full of agitation. Yep, that's normal. It's the weather conditions of the mind. Now it's in the agitated weather. Okay, fine. Oh, now doubt and skepticism is arising. That's also normal. Just another weather pattern that sometimes blows through the mind. And you wait, and that goes away. So you just watch the impermanence of these things, the impermanent and impersonal nature of these shifting conditions of mind. And as you do that, then eventually you stop taking them seriously. So then when that skeptical, doubting pattern arises in the mind, you don't think, I am doubting, I am skeptical. You just think, oh, the mind is doing that skeptical doubt thing again. How cute, little buddy. And you wait, and it goes away. And you realize, oh, that wasn't me. It never was me. It was just another temporary, impersonal condition of mind. Comes and goes, just like everything else. And eventually at some point, if you continue to practice diligently and persistently, then at some point, you'll find the mind settling into jhana. But that might not be this week or this decade or this lifetime, and that's okay. It'll happen whenever the conditions are right for it to happen. Okay. Sud says, if everything is societal conditioning, then what is good and bad karma and their results? An airplane pilot who flies a plane skillfully, thereby keeping all the passengers safe, isn't that praiseworthy? Is there good karma then that the pilot acquired there, if it has to be limited to the conditioned world? So, Sud, people still make choices, and those choices are based upon intentions, and those intentions can be either wholesome or unwholesome. They can be either beneficial or harmful. We can further subdivide beneficial into that which leads to awakening and that which does not. So the case of, again, the pilot who's carefully keeping the passengers safe, well, that is wholesome action. They're making a choice which is wholesome. They could also choose to crash the plane. Instead, they chose to fly safely, to keep people safe. So they made a choice. Was that conditioned? Yes, but there's still the element of volition. So Buddhism is not a teaching of utter fatalistic predeterminism. It is a teaching of action, of choice, of decision. But that decision is influenced by conditions, not determined by conditions, but influenced by it. So someone who chooses to do that which is wholesome, who chooses to do that which is wise, that is in fact praiseworthy. Someone who chooses to do that which is harmful and foolish, that is blameworthy, subject to criticism. People who choose to do morally neutral things, well, it's just utterly meaningless from the perspective of Buddhism. So it's kind of like, do you pick the green marker or the blue marker? Who cares? It doesn't mean anything at all. But do you choose to help people or harm people? that does matter. That is important. That is praiseworthy or blameworthy. Okay. Okay. Wasabi-chan says, my elderly cat died last week on my lap. Well, it's very sweet. Yeah. Yeah, the previous monastery cat died sleeping by my side. So I understand what you're going through. It's bittersweet. So Wasabi-chan says, I meditated, practiced metta, chanted, and then dedicated the merit to him. That's good. I also had a fruit tree planted in his name. It's lovely. Would this help him have a fortunate rebirth? Do you think it's possible that because he lived 17 years as a cat, that his negative karma would be exhausted? Do you want to answer this one?
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Well, so Sabi, I'd like to extend my condolences on the passing of your cat. You don't say how long you two lived together, but perhaps as long as 17 years, sounds like. So my condolences to you. Passing of a pet, of course, can be quite a difficult thing. And anumotana, your good deeds, trying to help him. When we say anumotana, it means that I rejoice in your goodness, your good deeds, and I think these are wonderful things you've done for them. Very very traditional Buddhist things to do because of the good karma associated with them, and unfortunately, I was going to say that I just misread your question. I apologize. So I have to start again. You asked, would this help him have a fortunate rebirth? It could help him, I believe. That's the teaching, and I believe that it could. Whether or not it did it's hard for us to know. It says in the suttas that the Buddha said that really only a Sammasambuddha can understand the complex workings of karma and know what would happen in any particular case, because karma is so complicated. But what you did is a very positive thing, and so we can take comfort in that, And he's quite a lucky cat to have an owner who would do this for him, and so that is one way we can look at it. And do you think it's possible that because he lived 17 years as a cat, that his negative karma would be exhausted? Well, we could think that it could be. It's for the same reasons. It'd be hard to know whether or not it really was exhausted if you went on to a better rebirth. So this is another case where we can take some comfort in knowing that you did for him what you could, and he's very lucky in that way. And that if you can continue sharing merit with him and your loving kindness. There's something you can continue to do, and this will continue to help him in the future, and continue to be good karma for you as well by doing these things. And so perhaps that's the mindset we can have towards it. Yeah.
Great. And Norma says, so Mara's mission to keep us believing in samsara. Mara is not a devilish being. I agree with your first statement, Norma. I'm not really on board with your second one. I actually would say, with all due respect to Lord Mara, I actually do think he's a devilish being. His mission statement in life is to obstruct Buddhists from practicing Buddhism. That's pretty devilish. So, briefly speaking, Mara likes having people in his control. And when we practice Buddhism, then we start slipping out of his control. Of course, Mara wants to keep us stuck in samsara, because then he still has power over us, still has influence over us anyway. So absolutely, yes, Mara is a devilish being. He's the deceiver, the trickster, the one who plants wrong views in us, who tells us things that are contrary to the Buddhist teachings, who tries to get us to live in ways that are contrary to the Dhamma. So yes, Mara is in fact a devilish being. He's also delusional, and it's good to keep in mind that he's doing what he's doing because he thinks that that's the proper way to behave. So from the perspective of Maras, he's probably a great guy, great Mara, doing a good Mara job. From the perspective of Buddhism, he's really evil. So definitely devilish. And Norma clarifies, not like the Christian devil, a fallen lord. I mean, it's been so long since I was Christian, I actually don't remember much about Christianity. So yeah, I can't do that kind of cross-religious comparison very easily. Mara is a deva, so a very high-ranking deva, actually, a very powerful celestial being, very powerful angelic being. But he's also pretty evil. So how that would fit into the Christian scheme of things, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
I wonder if we look at it from a Buddhist point of view, we talk about not like the Christian devil, a fallen lord, that actually he's been reborn into this state. Because and he exhibits these tendencies because he's these tendencies of character. And then so he does the kinds of things he does because that's his bent based on past actions. He's conditioned to act in this way. Of course, he has a choice about how to act in any given circumstance. He's not determined to act in this way. I mean, excuse me. He may be determined to act in this way, but it isn't determined for him that he has to act in this way. And then, as a result of doing bad karma, he unfortunately will fall into a bad rebirth. There are a couple of are there a couple of suttas about this? There's one sutta anyway I can remember this. Right? There's one sutta I can remember about this. Mahamoggallana is talking to Amara and talking about how he had been Amara in the past, and Mahamoggallana had been. So a chief disciple of the Buddha in a distant past life had been Amara, and had due to his evil actions had been reborn in hell. And so he warns the Mara. He warns this Mara he's talking about in the Majjhima Nikaya that he better be careful about what he does, or he'll suffer a similar fate. And so we develop our character over time through our actions. We develop tendencies to do certain kinds of things. By doing them over and over again. And so I would assume that this is kind of how Mara ended up being reborn as he is. And then by continuing these kinds of negative actions, evil actions, then be reborn in another negative way.
Okay. And Mike says, what is a good way to stop seeking validation, and how can one distinguish between the desire for clarification and the desire for validation, ideally before acting upon such a desire? Well, first off, I would say that the important thing you should be seeking validation from is the Dhamma itself. So learn the Buddha's teachings and then evaluate. Am I making a sincere effort to follow the Buddha's teachings? If the answer is yes, then you are validated. And you don't need other people to validate you. In fact, there's a good chance that other people will criticize you. The more closely you follow the Dhamma, the more likely it is that worldly people will criticize you. That's okay. Doesn't matter because you're validated by the Dhamma. Whether other people recognize it or not actually doesn't really matter. And actually what you'll find is that people who are good and wise will also appreciate you. The closer you follow the Dhamma, the more they will appreciate what you're doing, and the more that they will appreciate your life. But you also won't need that validation either, because you'll already know that you're validated by the Dhamma itself. So that's the only form of validation that's really necessary. Everything else is just ego. It's just craving for ego. And I don't know what you mean by desire for clarification. So you would need to explain that further before I could talk about that. Okay, and we have some more things about Mara. Okay, delightful topic. So Mary says, Lucifer was God's second favorite angel. He was jealous of Gabriel and turned against God and became a powerful evil spirit. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really line up perfectly with the figure of Mara in Buddhism. Lydia says, if Mara is a deva, does that mean it took good karma to become a Mara deva? Actually, yes. This is one of the kind of sad things about the character of Mara, which is that, by the way, Mara is not a single being, by the way, it's actually a category of devas. So commonly we talk about a particular Mara, so Lord Mara, Nemochi, the enemy. But there's actually a lot of other Mara devas, but we tend to talk about one in particular most often. So it's actually technically a category of devas, a category of rebirth, which anyone can be born into. And it is a category which is at the absolute top of the Kamaloka, the top of the sensual domain, the domain of sensual devas. So it's part of the Parinimittavasavati deva, devas that can control the creations of others, which is at the highest level of the sensual sphere heaven realms. So to be born as a Mara Deva actually does require very strong good karma from past lives. So this means that Mara made a lot of good karma in past lives in order to be born as such a lofty Deva. And the sad thing is, he's using it to make tremendously bad karma. He's using that position of being this incredibly powerful, influential, peaceful, happy life, and he's using it to disrupt Buddhist practice, so making very bad karma. So it took good karma to get there, and now he's making a lot of bad karma, which means he's going to fall away from there. As Ajahn Wade said, he'll fall away from there and be reborn somewhere unpleasant as a result. So it's good to remember that Mara is still making choices. Just being born into the group of Mara Devas doesn't mean that you're forced to do bad things. They still make choices. They still make decisions. Julie says, can any outside forces, such as devas or loved ones who died, help us with regard to Mara? A popular topic. Do you want to talk about this one?
Well, outside forces. Maybe what I'll say is that perhaps the most important really is to focus on your own internal skills in terms of dealing with Maras, and that whether we're talking about Maras outside of ourselves or the Maras within us, the evil qualities within us, which would be, you could be talked about in terms of greed, aversion, and delusion, then the key thing is that we don't go along with the greed, aversion, and delusion. Interestingly, the sutta that I was talking about before in the Majjhima Nikaya, the way Mahamoggallana talks about how he affected people as a Mara in the past, what he did was he provoked their kilesas, their defilements, greed, aversion, and delusion. He provoked their defilements to get them to do things that he wanted them to do that were bad for them and bad for other people. And so the kind of the defense against Mara there is to not go along with greed, aversion, and delusion. And so use your various Buddhist skills to not go along with those defilements. Yeah.
Okay, and Anne Gorham says, what to do if you point your finger to Mara and he got so mad at you for mocking him? Well, if you're actually seeing and interacting and communicating with Mara, then odds are we have other problems that we need to talk about. But I would say that the proper attitude towards Mara is compassion. So actually, when I think of Mara, I actually feel a little bit sad. As I mentioned earlier, it took a lot of good karma for him to be born in such a positive rebirth. And he's using that position to do really bad things. So that's actually really sad. So compassion for Mara is the proper response. Yeah.
I wonder if I could, if Bhante, if I could backtrack a little bit to talk some more on the subject of outside forces that can help us with devas, with Maras.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Well, I think there's another kind of answer to this, which may be more faith-based from some points of view, which is that many Buddhists find comfort or feel like they find help in appealing to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas for help. Okay, so for example, here at Empty Cloud, we have a lovely statue of the Bodhisattva, the great Bodhisattva Guan Yin, the one who hears the cries of the world out in front of the monastery and many inside the monastery as well. Also also some other bodhisattvas within the monastery also, but this Guan Yin is one that comes to mind. And so many Buddhists will appeal to Guan Yin, and will think of Guan Yin frequently to develop a karmic relationship with her and worship her, and call on her in times of need. Also, many Buddhists would do this with the Buddha and with other enlightened beings. So members of the holy Sangha, the Sangha of enlightened disciples, that they may have karma with, and ask them for help. The act of worship I mentioned with regard to Guan Yin is one of the reasons that many Buddhists practice worship, is to develop that karmic connection with the higher being for help with these kinds of things.
Okay. And Victoria says, if you got the choice to be reborn in a certain Deva realm, which sounds the most appealing to you? Well, none of them actually. And if I had to pick one, actually one of the bottom three, the Bhuma Deva. The reason for that is because they're the closest to the human realm, which means they have the most opportunity to hear the Dhamma. Second best would be the Chatu Maharajika Devas, because again, very close to the human realm. A lot of them were disciples of the Buddha. A lot of them were disciples of different bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. There's a lot of conversations where, again, the lower ranking devas would interact with Buddhists and learn the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma and even become stream enterers. And my third option would be the Tavatimsa realm, because once again, it's very close to the human realm, and they had a lot of interaction with the Buddha and with Buddhist monks of different kinds. So if I had to be born in a Deva realm, I would pick one of those bottom three, because that's where I would have the best chances of continuing my Buddhist practice. Do you have thoughts on this one?
Yes, I do.
Which Deva realm do you want to be born in?
A different kind of answer, but these. Well, so Bhante, I wonder. A question for you, actually: are the pure abodes, are they considered Deva realms? They
are, but you have to be a non-returner to get there. So that actually is the most correct answer.
But it's a pretty exclusive club. So there's the pure abodes. So you have to be an anagami. There's another one that is there's the Western Paradise, of course, in the two-seated heaven. The whole two-seated heaven sounds pretty unbelievably amazing in general. So according to the lore amongst Thai meditation circles, the two-seated heaven is, and I don't know if this is also in the commentaries. I don't think it's indicated. I don't think it's indicated in the suttas. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Bhante, but the two-seated heaven is the plane of bodhisattvas, and there are many wonderful things about this. And so they take a lot of delight in worship and practicing Buddhist teachings and so on like this. But the Western Paradise is a special place in this. Commonly referred to in Pure Land Buddhism, which they say is the most populous form of Buddhism in the world, actually. And that it was established by a Buddha of a former time as a place with ideal conditions for practicing Dhamma. And so there's the Amitabha Buddha. His name is the Amitabha Buddha, a Sammasambuddha, like the Buddha of our history, the Gautama Buddha. And he resides there and teaches. and also there are bodhisattvas there as well. So, for example, the great bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara has a particular realm within the Western paradise, they say, and so that would be a really nice one.
Yeah, that would be a good place to be reborn. Yeah. Okay. And Kauser Friend says, with the 10 fetters, how can there be conceit without self-view, and how can we best deal with conceit? So I assume by conceit you're referring to the Pali term asmimana, which is one of the 5 higher fetters, which is only eliminated with full enlightenment. And self-view, I assume you're talking about sakkaya ditthi, which is one of the first 3 lower fetters, which is removed with stream entry. So sakkaya ditthi is defined in the suttas as identifying as the 5 khandhas. So identifying as the specific details of body and mind, like thinking, I am this physical body. I am these emotions. I am these thoughts. I am these opinions. I am these ideas. It's identifying as the specific details of body and mind. Whereas asmimana is just the generalized belief in self-existence, but not tied to anything in specific. So asmimana is actually just simply the belief, I am. So sakkaya ditthi is the belief, I am the body, I am the mind, I am these opinions, I am these ideas, and so on. Asmimana is just the belief, I am. I exist. I am an individual. That's the distinction. Okay, and we have a question here from Joseph. Great one for Ajahn Wade to answer. So Joseph says, could you talk about how the lowest form of deva in the first heaven, closest to the human realm, has more pleasure than a wheel-turning king, the best human rebirth? Mara's heaven is 5 heavens above that, and he is one of the highest devas of that realm. The level of intoxication to sensual pleasures he's experiencing is astoundingly hard to fathom. This isn't actually a question so far.
Oh, well, yeah. How the lowest form of deva in the first heaven.
I mean, it's true. The Buddha did say that even the lowest devas have a more pleasant life than the highest humans. But once again, there's not actually a question here. So I think there's not a question here.
Oh, okay.
So that's the last question, and we're getting towards the end of our time together, so I think we'll go ahead and conclude at this time with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you all next time.